everyone, my name is Katie and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video we are ranking Avenged Sevenfold albums. So when it comes to Avenged Sevenfold, I'm your girl. I know every single song from the beginning of the discography to the very end and everything in between. I am like an Avenged Sevenfold expert. This really goes back to my childhood when I first heard them in 2005 when they released City of Evil. I remember Backcountry and Beast and the Harlot were really popular songs at the time. And I just fell in love with this band, and they became one of my favorite bands throughout my entire life. In my teen years especially, I was super obsessed with them. Like, I saw them in concert 6 times in the span of like a year and a half. It was crazy. My username across all social media at the time was Caitlin A7X. Like, I was all about this band. I wanted to get a death bat tattoo when I turned 18. It never actually happened, but hey, you never know. My point is, I love Avenged Sevenfold and I'm so excited to do like a full analysis on their discography and rank their albums from the top to the bottom. It's going to be a lot of fun. So the tiers that we're going to be using to rank these albums today are pretty self-explanatory. At the top we have God tier and then it goes all the way down to trash. So of course, as always, the meh tier is going to be the ones that are take or leave. I don't really love or hate those albums, but I don't listen to them a lot. Honestly, Avenged Sevenfold does not have that many studio albums, so I feel like we don't need a lot of tiers for this one, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to be using all of these. I don't know if anything's going to end up in trash or not. Let's see what happens. First off, we have the debut Avenged Sevenfold album, Sounding the Seventh Trumpet. So my view on this album has changed a lot. Back in the day when I was an Avenged Sevenfold fan, I never listened to this one. It was one of those things where I listened to it a few times and was like, I'm into the other stuff. I was more about like City of Evil and Nightmare and all that. But now that I'm older, I appreciate the rawness and the like hardcore punk aspect of this album. It's a little bit less metalcore. It's more into that hardcore element. I feel like they started doing metalcore in the next album, but this one is just, it's a pretty solid album looking back. I really like Lips of Deceit. Warmness on the Soul is an amazing ballad, like love song on this album. To End the Rapture is great. Honestly, a lot of my favorite Avenged Sevenfold songs are on this album, and I've grown to love it a lot. I won't say it's their best, you know, it's not the best production value, of course, and that's usually a given with debut albums. The songwriting is a little bit stale after a while. A lot of the songs sort of like blend together. You have a few diamonds in the rough. That's actually an EP on this list. We're going to get to that. But I'll say overall, it's a good album. I used to would have put this in the meh tier. Like, when I was younger, I didn't appreciate it. I think it's gone up in the rankings a little bit in my mature age. So I'm going to say good. Next up, we have Waking the Fallen. And I think this might be my favorite metalcore album of all time. We had that hardcore punk aspect from Sounding the Seventh Trumpet, but they made it a little bit more metallic. And it's got some melody to it as well, which Sounding the Seventh Trumpet didn't really have. I would call this melodic metalcore. So I'm going to put it in almost the God tier. I'm thinking about it, but I'm going to put it in great. I feel like this was a little bit before Avenged Sevenfold really found that sound that made them who they are and like what they're known for. So I can't really put it in God tier, but it's freaking close. This is one of those albums that I know front to back, like the back of my hand. Like, I've listened to this one almost the most out of their entire discography. We have the classic Unholy Confessions, which has like the best drumming ever from Jimmy the Rev Sullivan. Can we just talk about the drums in that song? It's always been my favorite. That song alone used to make me want to learn to play the drums. I never did though, because I'm a procrastinator and I'm really lazy. But anyways, I really like Chapter 4. I Won't See You Tonight Part 1 and 2 is like a perfect two-parter song. We have Chapter 4, we have Desecrate Through Revenants, we have Clairvoyant, what's it called? I don't even remember at this point. We have Eternal Rest, which is such a fun, groovy, like heavier song. I love watching the live performances of that song. I think it's from the Rock am Ring, like 2007, something like that. Honestly, this album is amazing front to back. Next up, we have City of Evil. I feel like this is really the album that put Avenged Sevenfold on the more mainstream map. Like, a lot of people learned who Avenged Sevenfold was from this album, and rightfully so. It's a very fun album. It's kind of experimental and they really established their own sound here. I feel like this is when Avenged Sevenfold really came into their own.
Commercially and artistically.
I love the theme behind the City of Evil. Like, Hollywood is this evil, like, God-forsaken city, and like Beast and the Harlot, the music video kind of goes into all the evil behind Hollywood and all that. Love that, and there's just so many standout tracks on this album. We got the classic Backcountry, we got Trashed and Scattered, a lot of fast drumming, like almost thrashy, like kind of crossover thrashy in some of the drumming elements of this album. You definitely hear that punk influence that they have because they kind of came from the punk slash hardcore punk scene, and you can definitely still hear that in this one, but they did their own thing. We have Seize the Day, which is my like almost all-time favorite Avenged Sevenfold song. I almost said it. It's definitely up there. I love that song. It's so beautiful. It actually still like makes me cry sometimes, which is rare with music, but it works with me on that one. There are a few songs on this album that I'm kind of just like not too excited about, but I never really skip them. I can listen to this album all the way through with no skip, so I feel like that is a good way to describe a good album. So I'm gonna put this in great. I'm actually gonna put it behind Waking the Fallen. I do like Waking the Fallen a little bit more. If you asked me this 10 years ago, it would have been the other way around, but something about that old, more hardcore slash old school metalcore stuff, I kind of like it more now. It's like flipped for me. Next up, we have the iconic 2007 Avenged Sevenfold self-titled album. This is like the creme de la creme for a lot of people. Like they think this is the all-time best Avenged Sevenfold album. This, I think, was their most commercially successful, if I'm not mistaken. Like I said, City of Evil put them on the map, but this one put them even more on the map. Like we got a little teaser with City of Evil, and I remember around like 2007, 2008, after this album came out, Avenged Sevenfold was all over everything. Like MTV was playing their music video for Afterlife all the time. This was a really big one. And don't forget, like Almost Easy, that was a big popular one. We have Scream. I would say my favorite underrated song from this album is Brompton Cocktail. I feel like the meaning behind it is really dark, but it's honestly very effective. And we have Dear God, which was a really nice ballad. It has kind of like country vibes. I don't know. But I will say this album as a whole has a lot of that like classic Avenged Sevenfold sound that I said they established on City of Evil. But I feel like they made it a little bit more pop and mainstream, a little more melodic, and I feel like that's really what got them the commercial success that they have. People aren't going to like that because it's not so heavy, and a lot of people want the more hardcore stuff, but commercially speaking, this was probably the smartest choice for them, and it gave them the freedom to do whatever they wanted after this. This is one of my favorite albums when it comes to the songwriting from Jimmy the Rev Sullivan. I feel like the Rev was such a good songwriter. How can I forget A Little Piece of Heaven? That is my all-time favorite Avenged Sevenfold song. That's the reason why I didn't say Seize the Day was. Because that one is just like Avenged Sevenfold's Bohemian Rhapsody. Like that is their magnum opus song. It's so beautiful. It's really a classical song turned metal or whatever. The meanings behind it are really dark and fun and scary, and I love it. If you go back and watch their making of series of this album and just watch everything they did in the studio for this album, you will definitely appreciate all the work that went into it and the songwriting skills. And this one is just like sealed with a kiss from the Rev. Like this is his album. He does a lot of backup vocals on this one too, and he just slayed the world with this one. So I'm going to put it in God tier because I definitely think it deserves the success that it got. It's unique. I don't think anyone has even come close to being like Avenged Sevenfold on this album. Like no one can compare. They have something special. They got all the like layers of vocal harmonies. They did a lot more of the like harmonizing guitar solos and stuff in this one. I just feel like they really just peaked here. This is like maybe Avenged Sevenfold's peak. Next up we have Nightmare. So I remember when Nightmare came out, like the single Nightmare, and I was like, oh my god. I felt like that was just huge to hear Avenged Sevenfold. Kind of the same as before on the self-titled album, but it was a little bit darker, and rightfully so. You know, the Rev passed away during the writing and recording of this album, and I feel like you feel a lot of that dark energy. But now looking back, I feel like it's almost cathartic to listen to. It's not really a negative darkness in my opinion. I feel like it was sort of like Jimmy's like goodbye. Jimmy doesn't do all the drumming on this album. I think like Mike Portnoy did a lot of the drumming on this. But we have the track Fiction, which is like Jimmy's goodbye, which is so heartbreaking. But I feel like it really stands out on this album. We have a lot of cool, like I feel like they went back to more metalcore here, but it was kind of like darker metalcore. Maybe not even metalcore, but it's sort of like progressive. Like we have the track Save Me. We have, is it called 4 a.m. I believe? I feel like metalcore might not even be the word. It's more of like progressive metalcore. And we have the song Save Me. We have Tonight the World Dies. We have Victim. They're all very progressively written songs. That may be Mike Portnoy's drumming that comes in there, because he was a very progressive drummer. So Far Away was like the goodbye letter to Jimmy. You have Fiction, which is from Jimmy, and then So Far Away to Jimmy. So I just feel like this album is really overshadowed by that death. It's like bittersweet. I will say Welcome to the Family was a really fun single from this album, and I still listen to that one to this day, like pretty often on its own. I still listen to this album all the way through a lot of times, but if there's one song I go out of my way to listen to, I think it's Welcome to the Family. And I will say the song God Hates Us, I used to think that song was so like heavy and dark and crazy, and I couldn't believe I was listening to a song with those kind of words. I think it's so funny. But anyways, I'm going to put Avenged Sevenfold's Nightmare in the great tier. It's almost God tier, but it has something missing from it. So I'm gonna put it I'm going to put it right behind City of Evil, but I feel like it might be tied with City of Evil, honestly. I do want to say I get a little bit of an influence from Megadeth in this album. I don't know where I'm getting that, but I always felt like it gives me Megadeth vibes. Maybe a little darker than what Megadeth usually does, but something about it has Megadeth inspiration. Next up, we have Hail to the King. So this was another really commercially successful album from Avenged Sevenfold. The thing about this is it's more of a homage album. They're trying to like pay homage to the classic metal bands. It's very much like the Black Album from Metallica, but written by Avenged Sevenfold. They didn't necessarily rip off these older bands, but you can tell that clearly their intention was to pull the inspiration from those bands. I remember watching the interviews back in 2013 of M Shadow saying like they want to get back to the meat and potatoes of metal and just do the simple stuff. It's very Black Album, like teeters the line of hard rock and metal, and it's got some like groovier, slower riffs and that sort of thing to it. We have like This Means War. It's like the sad but true for this album, so it's definitely Black Album vibes. I think that's why they made the cover like that. So honestly, I have a weird love-hate relationship with this album because it's a great album. I love the song Requiem, Shepherd of Fire, Planets, Acid Rain. Oh, Acid Rain is so beautiful, by the way. But I feel like it's not really Avenged Sevenfold, honestly. It feels like a cover album, which I know that's what they were going for. Just because of that, I'm going to put it in great, but I'm going to put it right behind Waking the Fallen. I actually like it more than City of Evil. The only thing for me, like I said, it just doesn't really feel like Avenged Sevenfold. But if it wasn't them, I probably would, like if it was more original, I would say it's like a God tier album. Next is The Stage. Okay, so this is a weird album for me. When it first came out, I was so excited because I was just waiting for so long for an Avenged Sevenfold album. It was really only like 3 or 4 years, but it felt like forever for me because I was still very much in my like obsessed phase with this band. So I was really ready for The Stage. I liked the single The Stage that came out. It got me really excited. I liked some of the stuff that came out from the album, but overall, when we got the final product, I was a little bit bored with it. It's a very progressive, experimental album, but it comes out a little random for me. Like, it doesn't do a lot for me. I understand the inspiration behind it all. They wanted to do something different and creative. I'm gonna be real with you. I hate to be that toxic fan, but like, it just feels like without the Rev's songwriting skill, it just lacks a lot of that like spark that Avenged Sevenfold had. They had a certain like darkness and creativeness that only someone like Jimmy could bring to the table. I don't know if that's like completely true. It may just be that they wanted to do something different. Maybe if Jimmy was here, they still would have made this album. I don't know. But for me, it just doesn't feel right. I've never really loved this album. I think it has some really like objectively good songs on it. And overall, it's objectively good music. Like, they definitely have a lot of talent, but it's just not my style at all. So I'm going to put it in the meh tier. I'm not going to say trash because I respect it for what it is. Like I said, there are some songs on this album that I like, but for the most part, I'm not into it. I will say the song Exist is really cool. First of all, it has Neil deGrasse Tyson doing like a little speech, I guess you could call it, in the middle of the song. And I like that the concept of the song is it's supposed to be like, it begins with before time and then the Big Bang, and then it's like the journey of the universe up until now. It's like the song is supposed to represent that. That's really cool if they did that. I like the like celestial themes of that album. as a space nerd, I'm really into that, and I wish I would have liked it more for that reason, but I just didn't. And last but not least, we have the Diamonds in the Rough EP. So I recently saw M Shadow say on Twitter that he thinks this never should have been released, which I think is crazy because I actually like it now that I'm older. I mean, even when I was younger, I liked it. Of course, no band wants to like release their sloppy like leftovers or whatever. Like, these songs weren't put on albums for a reason. I get that. However, I think the song Dancing Dead alone makes this worth releasing. I love the guitar solo in that song, and I'm so glad that they decided to release it. There's some other good stuff on this, like Girl I Know is pretty cool. They added that Set Me Free song to this EP like a couple of years ago, but it didn't get released with the original EP, so I don't really know about all that. But either way, I'm gonna say overall this is a good album. If it's considered an album, I would put it good. Like, it's almost up there with great, but like I said, I get why they didn't release some of these songs. They're a little bit like two-dimensional, like not a whole lot going on. I get it. So it looks like that's all for my Avenged Sevenfold album ranking, and nothing made it in the trash tier, which is good, and I kind of suspected that would happen. So let me know in the comments down below what you agree with and disagree with on this album list. It looks a little different than I expected. I didn't think that the only God tier I would have is the self-titled, but honestly that's really the subjective truth for me. Looking at it, it looks true for me, so I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below what's different about your list. So I'm gonna wrap up this video right here, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for future music related content, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!